Okay, so we can begin by doing the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so good morning, everybody. And so today we're continuing our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, that's the Numerical Discourses of the Buddha. We're in the Book of Sixes, and today we come to Sutta number 36. As I said, I'm jumping around. I'm not taking every sutta, but picking up the ones that are more interesting or that need more explanation. And this sutta is concerned with the topic of, it's a very common topic or a very common experience in everyday life called disputes, arguments, conflicts. And you might think that in monastic life, everybody gets together in perfect harmony with great suffusive and all-pervading loving kindness, but not the case. But inevitably disputes, quarrels, arguments break out in monastic life, just like in the worldly life, in the secular life. And so the Buddha laid down certain principles or guidelines for dealing with disputes. And this sutta, as I said, comes in the Anguttara Nikaya, here in the Book of Sixes, but in the Anguttara Nikaya, it's actually an extract or an excerpt from a longer sutta that occurs in the middle-length discourses, in the Majjhima Nikaya. And in the Majjhima Nikaya, we can see it in context. So I'm switching over Nikayas from the Majjhima Nikaya now, from the Anguttara Nikaya to the Majjhima Nikaya, and this is Sutta number 104, which the Buddha gave near a village called Samagama, which was in the Sakyan country. Okay, so the background to the sutta is the passing away of Nigantanathaputta. Nigantanathaputta was the historical, not the founder of Jainism, but he was the most prominent teacher of Jainism at the time of the Buddha. It seems that Jainism, or at least the Jain philosophy and practice, would go back quite some time before the time of the Buddha. But during the Buddha's time, the most prominent teacher of the Jains was called in the Buddhist text Nigantanathaputta. Historically, he is known as Mahavira, which is probably a title which means the great hero, and he's also known as the Jina, the conqueror. And so from the word Jina, we get as a derivative the word Jaina, which is shortened to Jain. And the text tells us that Nigantanathaputta, or Mahavira, had just recently died at Pava. And Pava is actually not far from Rajagaha. I recall just 2019, I was in India, in North India, at Bodh Gaya. And then from Bodh Gaya, I went to Rajgir, and I think along the way, or somewhere off that route, we stopped at Pava to see the site of what the Jains will call the Mahaparinirvana of Mahavira. And it was very beautifully kept, almost impeccably clean. The monument, I believe it was on a lake. You sort of have to walk along a walkway onto the middle of the lake, and the temple is on the lake. It was very beautiful with nice statuary, nice monument. Okay, so the texts tell us that after the passing of Mahavira, or Nigantanataputta, his followers, in the Buddhist text, they are called the Nigantas. So they split into two, and they were having arguments, they were deep in disputes. And then one of the young monks named Chunda, who had spent the rainy season retreat at Pava, learned about this division and disputes amongst the Jains, and so he reported this to Venerable Ananda, and then the both of them decided to go to the Buddha to report on this, because this must be probably coming to the last years of the Buddha's life. So they knew that the Buddha is now probably in his advanced 70s, late 70s, approaching that decisive age of 80. And they're afraid, apprehensive, that the same fate might face the Buddhist community, that after the Buddha passes away, the Sangha is going to become split into at least two sides, each claiming to have exclusively the correct understanding of the Dhamma, and then disparaging and repudiating the other side. And so they come to the Buddha and they say that now Nataputta has passed away, and now his followers have become divided, split into two. And so Ananda says, the thought has occurred to me, I hope that no dispute like this will arise in the Sangha after you, the Blessed One, after you have passed away. Okay, then the Buddha says, what do you think? Those things that I have taught you on the basis of my direct knowledge, and these are what come to be known as the 37 aids to enlightenment, or Bodhi Pakhiya Dhammas, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 kinds of right effort, the 4 bases for spiritual power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 enlightenment factors, the Noble Eightfold Path. So do you see even 2 monks who are making different claims about these things, different interpretations? And then Ananda says, no, I don't see even 2 monks making different making different assertions about these things. But Ananda says, when the Blessed One has passed away, there are some people who might create a dispute in the Sangha about livelihood and about the patimokkha. The patimokkha is the code of rules for the monastics. Then Ananda says, such a dispute would be for the harm and unhappiness of many, for the loss, harm, and suffering of gods and human beings. Okay, then what the Buddha says here is quite significant, in my opinion. He says, a dispute about livelihood or about the patimokkha would be trifling, Ananda. And it seems to me this is a bit puzzling, because elsewhere the patimokkha, the code of monastic rules, is said to be one of the keys for the preservation of the Sangha for generations into the future. So there is a sutta, it's a passage in the Vinaya Pitaka where I think it's a Sariputta comes to the Buddha and says, what is the reason why the teaching of some of the Buddhas in the past didn't last long? And what is the reason why the teaching of some of the past Buddhas endured long into the future after their passing? And then the Buddha said it was because some of the Buddhas did not teach the Dhamma at length and in detail, and they didn't lay down regulations for the monastic community. And so after they passed away, their sasana, their dispensation, didn't last long. But other Buddhas, including myself, Buddha Gautama, taught the Dhamma in detail and at length, and expounding on deep principles in detail. And we lay down the code of discipline in detail for the disciples. And for that reason, the teaching of those Buddhas endured long into the future. And then the text uses a very nice simile to illustrate this point. It's like somebody collects a multitude of beautiful flowers and lays them out on a tray outdoors, and then a strong wind comes along, and that wind blows the flowers away so that the flowers get scattered in different directions. But somebody else collects a bunch of beautiful flowers and then ties them together on a string. And so when a strong wind blows, those flowers remain together. And so the text says that the flowers that are put out on the tray without being tied together, that is like the teaching of those Buddhas who didn't lay down a detailed code of conduct for disciples. After they pass away, the strong wind of maybe mental defilements or changing social conditions sort of blow on the flowers of the teaching, and the teachings get scattered and dissipated. Whereas the Buddha says, the flowers that are tied together by a string so that they hold together, that is like the teaching of those Buddhas, including Gautama Buddha, those Buddhas who lay down a code of discipline, a code of conduct for their disciples. And so after they pass away, the teaching will remain for a long time, because the beautiful flowers are like the teachings of the Buddha, and it is the code of discipline, which is the patimokkha, or the vinaya, that holds those flowers together, that holds the teachings together. And so I think this statement has to be carefully interpreted. It doesn't mean that, as maybe some monks today say, just get rid of the patimokkha, we don't need any code of discipline. But I think what it means is that disputes maybe about trifling points in the code of discipline are not that important. Like some monks say that if somebody puts milk into the tea, as the custom with the British style of making tea, then the monk can't drink it in the evening because milk is considered a food. But other monks say, milk in the tea, no problem, not a serious matter. So it's when disputes about these sometimes trivial matters, if they get blown out of proportion, that could lead to disputes in the Sangha that will lead to the decline of the Dhamma. So the Buddha here says a dispute about livelihood, the intention behind that, I have to say, is not quite clear to me. Or about the patimokkha would be trifling. But here's what the Buddha emphasizes: a dispute that might arise in the Sangha about the path or the way. That dispute would be for the harm and unhappiness of many, for the loss, harm, and suffering of devas and human beings. I think what the commentary explains by the path or the way, this would be about the patipada and the magga, and that would be a dispute about those 37 Bodhi Dhammas, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, so now it's at this point that the Buddha speaks about the 6 roots of dispute which we encounter in the Anguttara Nikaya. So it seems that the compilers of the Anguttara Nikaya, in order to create a volume based on numerical teachings, took out this passage on the 6 roots of disputes and then put it also into the Anguttara Nikaya. Let's take, we'll take the version in the Anguttara Nikaya, because this is my later translation, so some of the words I translated differently. So I prefer maybe these renderings. So we have, the text speaks about 6 roots of disputes, but if we look at them, we see that there are actually 11 factors that lead to disputes, because the first 5 we have pairs of factors joined together, whereas the 6th one we just have one single factor. But I think these pairs of factors are joined together because there's some similarity or complementarity between them. Okay, so the first case we have, a monk is angry and hostile, or angry and aggressive towards the other monks. And so the way the commentary explains, anger is like the early stage where you have some displeasure with one monk, has displeasure, anger towards another monk. And so sometimes that anger on its own would be enough to lead to conflict. But when the anger gets repeated over time, when it sort of festers inside, then it can turn into hostility, or even we could call this malice. Yeah, the Pali word is upanaha. And so what's called anger, or Koda, is the early stage of anger, and hostility or malice is an advanced stage where anger has turned into real hatred. Okay, so what happens? And we don't have to confine this to the monastic order, though it's originally, the sutta is originally spoken with reference to monks, but we could transpose this into a family situation, a community, a society, political arena, and so on. But here it's spoken in relation to monastics. Okay, so when a monk is angry and hostile, then the first problem, he dwells without respect and deference towards the teacher, that's the Buddha, towards the Dhamma, towards the Sangha. And because the mind is always overrun by anger and resentment, anger and hostility, one doesn't engage earnestly with the training. So one just keeps on dwelling on, one develops a kind of fault-finding mentality. And so when one is out in the open, one openly criticizes the other monk that one has the hostility towards, or one just retains it in the mind, and you don't have any interest in taking up the practice of meditation, developing concentration and wisdom, but instead one is just plotting and scheming and finding ways to get back at the monk for whom one has hostility. And then after one retains that anger and hostility inwardly, when the opportunity presents itself, then one creates a dispute in the Sangha. So one finds sometimes some little pretext to start. Usually what that monk will do, he'll start trying to win the group of other monks over to his side. Maybe, I know from firsthand experience. since I've been the victim more than the victimizer. But they'll start praising a few other monks, flattering them, maybe giving them little gifts if they get some extra, maybe extra good quality soaps or a nice extra robe, give to the other monks to win them over to his side. And then once he sees that he has a few friends, then he'll start speaking critically towards the monk or the group of monks that they don't like. And then once the opportunity presents itself, maybe that monk you don't like is giving a Dhamma talk, and then you start grumbling and complaining about some of the things he said, trying to find faults with it, his statements, saying that he's misrepresenting the Dhamma, that he hasn't studied properly, that he's saying those things just to try to win lay people to his side. And in fact, the monk who is also the one who is trying to instigate a conflict within the Sangha, also he'll be trying to win not only other monks to his side, but also he'll be trying to win from the lay community, to win lay people over to his side. First, just in what seem to be innocent ways, just speaking in soft and friendly ways to lay people, praising them, What are some of the other techniques he'll use? Anyway, there will be various ways in which he will win over a group of lay followers. Then when that opportunity presents itself, then he'll start attacking the monk or group of monks that he doesn't like. And now he has allies, a group of fellow monks who are also sort of almost pledged to support him, and a group of lay people who are favorably inclined to him. And in this way, he'll create a dispute in the Sangha that leads to the harm of many people, to the unhappiness of many people, to the ruin, harm, and suffering. And remember, not only of human beings, but it also says the ruin, harm, and suffering of devas and humans. Because apparently, even the devas, I don't have first-hand experience with devas, but just based on what I understand, that these are the lower devas, the earth-dwelling devas, not the devas in the higher heavenly realms, but they also have their biases, their prejudices, their weaknesses. And so if you create a conflict, the devas can also take sides. Some of the devas will side with the troublemaking monks. Probably what you would do, you would dedicate merit to the devas, to those devas, and those devas will then become your supporters. And in this way, the devas will throw themselves behind your back and support you when you get into conflict with the other group of monks. So it leads to the ruin, harm, and suffering of devas and humans, but also not only that there's dispute among the devas, but also because it leads to one of the things that lead to the decline, deterioration of the Dhamma will be disputes within the Sangha. And so the Buddha wants the Sangha, wants the Dhamma to endure long in the world. When the Buddha doesn't think, okay, I've been teaching 45 years, now I've propagated the Dhamma, I've done my work, now I can just peacefully pass into nirvana, and the Dhamma will continue on its own. But the Buddha looks long into the future, so he arises when he teaches the Dhamma, he wants the Dhamma to last in a wholesome, healthy state long into the future. And so one of the keys to ensuring that the Dhamma will remain long into the future is to lay down the provisions, the conditions for promoting and sustaining harmony in the Sangha. And so if you have a dispute in the Sangha, that will bring about deterioration of the Dhamma, and that will lead to the harm also of the Devas, because the Devas depend also, they also are followers of the Dhamma. Okay, so this is the first conditions that bring about dispute within the Sangha, anger and hostility. But now the Buddha lays down the provisions, the sort of protective measures that have to be adopted. So he says, if you perceive any such root of dispute, either, and this is important, either in yourselves or in others, you should strive to abandon that evil root of dispute. Okay, so you see, in a way, this shows the comprehensiveness of the Buddha's way of thinking, the Buddha's mind. So you have to look for the dispute in yourself. You have to keep sort of watch over your own mind. Am I tending to get angry and resentful and hostile towards my fellow monks? Or you could apply this in the family. Am I getting angry and hostile towards my, excuse me, my husband or my wife, or to my parents or to my children or my cousins or my cousins or my aunts or my uncles? Okay, so first you look to see, are those roots of dispute present within yourself? And so you keep watch over your own mind, and if you see those bad qualities developing in yourself, then you make the effort to abandon that root of dispute. But also you have to look at others, and this is not to have the fault-finding mind, but to ensure that there's communal harmony as sort of your responsibility as a member of the community to be able to tune into other people and sort of see what the mood is within the community. Is there some troublemaker or somebody who, a group that is forming, that could be potential troublemakers? And then if you see such people like that, then you have to find ways to help them to abandon that root of dispute. And so the Buddha lays down various provisions. I think we came across those suttas in the Book of Fives in the Anguttara Nikaya. What to do when you see somebody else is a troublemaker, is angry or hostile. Then you have to speak to that person, but the Buddha lays down the appropriate conditions. I didn't review the Book of Five. Let's see if I could get them out of the top of my head. You have to find the right time to speak to that person. So when the person is together with their friends, they're having a good time together, sitting around at the table, chit-chatting, maybe drinking tea, you don't sit down at the table and say, you know, you spoke like this to Tom. You shouldn't have spoken like that, because then you're going to embarrass the person and humiliate them, and then they feel more hatred towards you. But you have to find the right time. You get them when they're alone, when they're at leisure. So the right time. Oh, yeah, even before the time. This is especially with regard to faults. You have to determine whether the fault that you're going to ascribe to the person, whether it's true or false. Because somebody, there's always these tendencies for people to spread rumors about people. So-and-so did this, so-and-so said this about you. so-and-so is trying to create a conflict, so-and-so maybe took some robes out of the closet without permission, so-and-so didn't do his job of cleaning the hallway when everybody else is working. So you have to determine, is this just idle chatter and gossip, false gossip, or is it true or false? So when you want to criticize the person, first you find the appropriate time, then you sit down with them, and then you say that, I've heard people are saying that you did this or you didn't do that. Is that true or not? So you determine whether it's true or false. Okay, then when you're speaking to the person, I think this is also before you actually speak, you set up the mind of loving kindness towards the person. So you don't want to be speaking to the person with an angry mind, but you set up the mind of loving kindness, wishing for their well-being and happiness. And then the fourth condition is that when you speak to them, you do so with the wish to benefit them, to lift them up from misconduct and establish them in good conduct, to lift them up from the unwholesome and establish them in the wholesome. And then I think I got the fifth one. Wow. I think it's when you speak to them, you speak in a gentle way, in a soft and gentle way, not, you shouldn't have done that. You're just thoughtless, insolent, rude, inconsiderate. No, but you have to speak in a very polite, gentle way. In the case of monks, we're living together as monks. We want to have a harmonious society, a harmonious community, so that everybody can live together happily. And to keep the monastery functioning properly, we all have to do our share of work. And so it was your job to mop the hall, your job to mop the halls on Friday. And so I've heard that you didn't mop the hall. Could you have been ill on that day? And so in this way, you speak in a polite way so that they become favorably inclined. Okay, so that's dealing with getting rid of the root of dispute in others. So you find ways to discuss with them. And with regard to anger and hostility, you could say that, I saw that you were speaking to some of the others in a rather aggressive way, and we have to live together harmoniously. And so when we want to speak to others, we should learn to speak to them in a polite and gentle way, not with a sharp tongue. And then you have to say that we understand that when you speak in an angry way, that's coming from a mind of anger or hatred, and it's our job as Buddhist monastics, we have to develop loving kindness. So in this way, you speak to others in a way that will help them to overcome that root of dispute. Okay, so now here we have the Buddha speaking with regard to present conditions. So we have present conditions in yourself individually or in others. You abandon that root of dispute. But if you don't perceive any such root of dispute either in yourself or in others, then you should practice so that that evil root of dispute doesn't emerge in the future. And so we have the root of dispute both in yourself and in others at present and in the future. Okay, so that's abandoning the roots of dispute, the first root of dispute, anger and hostility. The next one, we have the monk who is a denigrator and insolent. So the two qualities here, one is denigration. Denigration The Pali word is mucky. The abstract quality is mukha, which literally means smearing. Like when you have oil and then you smear it. Or like a cleaning fluid, you're cleaning the table, you spray the cleaning fluid on the table, and then you use a cloth to smear it to clean the table. But this is like smearing the good reputation of others. So you denigrate others, you speak badly of others, you speak to others about the faults and bad qualities of others. And then the other quality is palasa, which is insolence. How do we understand insolence? Some other words that we could use.
Is it disrespect?
Disrespect. Yeah, disrespect. Acting in sort of hasty ways. Being presumptuous. Acting in somewhat aggressive ways, in ways that assume some kind of superiority, that you have some kind of superiority, and acting without care, without showing respect and consideration towards others, acting without consideration for others. Sometimes the synonym function. Disrespect, impudence, that's good. Impertinence, rudeness. Okay, so those would be good ways of understanding this. Okay, so those become roots of dispute. And you could sometimes see signs of insolence in people's behavior. Like even the way sometimes people open and close doors can be an indication of insolence. Just a few days ago, someplace on the internet, some of these little like sayings pop up. And one thing that I saw, there was the Trappist monk, famous monk and writer, Thomas Merton, and he met the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Of course, decades ago, Merton died in 1968, so it might have been mid-1960s. And when they met, Merton asked Thich Nhat Hanh, "What did you learn during your first year as a monk?" And Thich Nhat Hanh said, "How to open and close a door." It sounds so obvious. But how you open and close a door can indicate whether there's mindfulness or no mindfulness. And when there's no mindfulness, then you can act with insolence. Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you what I learned during my first year as a monk when we come to number 6. Okay, then envy, the next, again, we have a pair of qualities, envy and miserliness. So envy is like being jealous of others, and it could be either envy over like friendships, that's more like jealousy, where you might see another person becomes friendly with somebody else, and you want the affection of that person for yourself. And so when they become friendly with somebody else, then you feel jealousy. But I think envy is more, isa is the Pali word. I think you have something like this in Sinhala. Risha, could it be?
Yes, Bhante, it's called Irisha.
Yeah.
There's Isha.
Yes, Bhante, yes, Irisha.
So this is actually envying the good qualities of others. So instead of rejoicing in the good qualities of others, that is mudita, altruistic joy, sympathetic joy. But when you see others have good qualities, or else when they receive respect and reverence from others, then you feel a kind of burning in the heart. And because of that burning in the heart, then you create a dispute in the Sangha. And then miserliness here is retaining all of the gains for yourself. So you don't want to share, you maybe get offerings of robes, and you don't want to share them with others. Or in the regular monastic life, you get invitations, maybe from lay people to go to their homes for a meal, and you don't want to bring other monks along because then you're afraid that the lay people might like the other monks better than you. And so you try to keep the support of those lay people for yourself. So this is miserliness. Okay, then the next pair, craftiness and hypocrisy. So craftiness, if I remember correctly, the explanation, craftiness means that you scheme, plot, and plan in ways to cover up your faults so that others don't find out your faults. It's having kind of, we call it maybe a shady character. And hypocrisy is trying to display virtues that you don't really have. Like the text mentioned the example of a monk who might be rather rash in his movements, but then when he sees other people around, then he'll know that eyes will be focused on him, so that he starts moving very slowly and deliberately, so that people will think, he's so mindful, so concentrated. And then maybe when he sees other people around, especially lay people come to the monastery, he'll find a place under a tree out in the open. Then he'll sit down and cross his legs and sit in meditation. So people will think, he's really a meditator. Oh, he must be in the fourth jhana or in the fruition attainment. But then when the lay people move, then he goes back to scheming and plotting. Okay, so then we have evil desires. So this will be sort of the desire to get offerings from people, to be the desire for fame, for reputation, for praise of others. And then wrong view is not as singled out here, but usually it's taken to be the view that denies the operation of karma and its fruit. So that is taken to be like the primary type of wrong view, the view that there's no continued existence beyond death, and that there's no operation of the law of karma. There are like many other types of wrong views, but that is held to be the most serious of wrong views. Okay, then the sixth one is one who adheres to his own views, holds to them tenaciously, and relinquishes them with difficulty. Yeah, so this can be, you could see, a real cause of disputes within the Sangha when somebody adopts a particular interpretation, particular view, and then in the course of discussion, if that view is challenged, one doesn't want to consider other views, other ways of looking at an issue or interpreting a teaching, but when holds to those views dogmatically and gets into arguments with them and refuses to relinquish them. And so I said during my first year as a monk, and this was actually before I became a Theravada monk, I was ordained in California with a Vietnamese monk when we were living together in Claremont, California, and he would give me like teachings on Buddhism, but I had been reading some things on my own, and I would come up with my own ideas, and I would hold so strongly to my own view and refuse when my view differed from that of my teacher. I just refused to give up my view, and I would get into arguments with him. And then he taught me one theme of reflection that I should use. He said, you shouldn't think I am right and the other person is wrong. And you shouldn't think that, you shouldn't think that this view is mine, therefore it has to be right. But what you should do is put aside the thoughts of mine and the other person, but just think what is right, what is wrong. Don't think I am right and they are wrong. And he said you should reflect, every day reflect in that way, thinking, I shouldn't think I have to be right and the other person wrong, but the important thing is to investigate and find out what is right and what is wrong. Okay, so that takes us through the 6 roots of disputes. Maybe at this point we'll ask whether there's any questions. And the way to pose questions is to use the hand symbol. Okay, so I see a raise hand symbol. So I see the first one is Madeline in the UK. Oh, you have to unmute.
Sorry.
Okay.
What is an earth-dwelling deva? Is this somebody who lives amongst us and is just disguised as a deva? Are they walking about?
What are the
on
earth? What are the earth-dwelling devas? Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
Might I recognize one?
Probably not, unless you have the divine eye. Okay, so it's said that there are akasa tacha bhumata. This is we do in the dedication of merit, akasa tacha bhumata deva naga mahidika. So it's said that there are devas that dwell on the earth. So it's not that they're walking on the ground in the disguising themselves as human beings, but probably in deep forests and jungles, there are supposed to be devas, spiritual beings dwelling.
Oh, I just thought they were spiritual beings. I didn't know they were earth-dwelling. Oh, I see.
They dwell on the earth, so they're spiritual beings. We don't normally see them, though maybe sometimes they can materialize and appear to people, perhaps. Yeah,
Are they a bit like the Catholic guardian angels?
exactly like the angels. That, in fact, the people could have their protective deities. Those would be like the protective angels.
Oh, thank you, Bhante.
Okay, next is Vandana.
Thank you, Bhante, for your teaching. So I have a question about Pratimokha, or the monastic code. So, and the dispute, when Buddha was talking to Ananda about the dispute can lead to the division in the Sangha. So I was just thinking that in Abhidhamma, I was reading a book from a Abhidhamma center, and then it says that one time there was a dispute among monks that one one monk put the bowl in a wrong way, and the other monk they had an argument, and Buddha had to leave for a certain time because they had a big argument for a small issue. And then later on, that monk actually went. Maybe they started the Abhidhamma or whatever. I didn't get the clarity on that, but I was just thinking that the different tradition who emerge in Buddhism, Pali canon, and then Theravada, Abhidhamma, and then Mahayana, and then Vajrayana. And I was just wondering if it because of the result of the dispute among the Sangha, or this is something completely different?
Yeah, no, that was an incident that took place during the Buddha's lifetime. It's not really directly concerned with the Abhidhamma. Let me just see if I could remember the origin of it was a rather trivial matter concerned with proper etiquette in the toilet.
Yeah.
A matter of what to do with the water in the bucket that is used for washing after using the lavatory.
Yes.
And a trivial origin, but each of those two monks had their own followers, and then that led to a dispute, and the two sides started to argue and fight with each other. And then the Buddha tried to reconcile the two sides that were arguing, but the monks they wouldn't even listen to the Buddha. They said, "Bhante, this is our matter, not yours. We'll deal with this. You get off, get out of here." And then the Buddha, he left the Sangha community and went Palilaya. He went off to a little forest grove, and then he sat at the foot of a tree. And then there was an elephant would bring him water, I think, and a monkey would bring him fruits to eat. Yeah, so that is one issue. Quite a different issue is the other one about the emergence of different schools of Buddhism. And that's quite interesting because it seems to me, my hypothesis, how did the unified Sangha become divided into so many different schools? My suspicion is, or hypothesis would be that the original cause of the division was simply the geographical spread, originally the geographical spread of the Sangha over a large area in India. So there would be different communities based in different parts of India, particularly northern India. And so, say in the west of India, I think, is probably where the school that we now call the Theravada took its origin. And in central India, another group of schools would have originated. And in the northwest of India, the school that came to be called the Vaibhashika or Sarvastivada originated. And so there was said to be something like 18 schools of Buddhism within the first, say, 3 centuries of Buddhist history, and probably primarily based in different geographical regions. And they would have had, the nucleus of the teachings would have been pretty much the same, the Sutta, Pitaka, and the Vinaya, though there would have been maybe differences in interpretation of the suttas and the application of the Vinaya. But in time, like different detailed doctrinal systems originated, which became the different Abhidharma systems. So there are like 3 different Abhidharma systems, probably emerging by the 3rd century after the Buddha's passing. And then by the 4th century, then sort of a new conception of the Buddhist path, the Buddhist ideal would have originated. But looking back to some of the early texts, especially looking at the Jataka collection and some of the minor works of the Khuddaka Nikaya, the works like the Jatakas, the Charya Pitaka, and the Buddha Vangsa, which gives the story, the background story of the Buddha Gautama, his attainment of enlightenment as a bodhisattva. So those minor texts then became the basis for the systematization of the teachings on the bodhisattva path, which then evolved into the Mahayana Buddhism.
And sorry about the what about this Vajrayana, which has Param Sambhav?
Okay, yeah, the Vajrayana is a sort of an evolution that took place in Mahayana Buddhism, maybe 8th century, 9th century of the Common Era, drawing upon, there would have been like an underlying foundation of practices which are called tantric practices, which probably go back to a very early period, not as parts of Buddhism, but as parts of, using the broad term, Hinduism. But some of them probably come even from much earlier periods, sort of ritualistic and ceremonial practices and yogic practices of controlling the breath and channels in the body. And then they become absorbed into Mahayana Buddhism and systematized in a way that gives rise to what is called the third yana, which becomes Vajrayana.
Yeah, thank you. That was my assumption too. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I see Julianne.
Thank you, Bhante, for the teachings. My question is on the relative trifling matter of the Patimokkha and livelihood that we saw earlier.
Yeah.
I was wondering if part of the answer was not having to do with the fact that sanghas will decline and go individually eventually, and so that if the main function of the Patimokkha is to keep it together longer, then that's good, but it's ultimately less important than whether whoever's on the path is on the right path and with the right goal in mind, something along those lines. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, that's what I take to be the intention behind that statement of the Buddha. But the Patimokkha certainly, we might, let us say, within the Patimokkha and other parts of the Vinaya, a distinction is sometimes made, I think, in the Vinaya or in the suttas between, I'll use the Pali word, adi brahmacharyaka sila and abhisamacharika sila. Okay, adi brahmacharyaka sila are the rules that pertain to the fundamentals of the spiritual life. Those would be the fundamental monastic rules, which would include, okay, the major rules like requiring celibacy, non-killing, not stealing, not making false claims to spiritual attainment, a number of other rules pertaining to proper avoiding other types of sexual misconduct, and a whole bunch of other rules that are very fundamental to the renunciant life. The adi samacharika sila are rules that pertain to what might be called proper etiquette. So those, I would say that there can be differences. The adi brahmacharya sila would be, those are the fundamental rules, have to be maintained in order for the monastic life to exist properly. The rules pertaining to proper etiquette can be variable. And a lot of them come from the background, ancient Indian background. For example, when monks would pick flowers to make offerings, people complained. They thought it's not proper for the monks to be plucking flowers. And so the Buddha had, out of the pressure from the lay community, he laid down a rule that a a fully ordained monk shouldn't destroy plant or vegetation life. But the rule only pertains to fully ordained monks or monastics, but not to novices. So in the monastery, the samaneras, the novices, can pluck the flowers to collect for the flower offerings. But the monks don't do that. Another similar rule, conforming to the cultural understanding, is digging the ground and even giving an order to dig the ground. The monk is not supposed to even give an order to dig the ground, because people believe that maybe they were complaining that when you're digging the ground, inevitably you're destroying life, even though you're doing it unintentionally, beings that you don't see. And so the monk can't give an order to a layperson, say a worker at the monastery, dig the ground here. But if you're constructing another building, or in ancient times when you're building, when you want to get water, you need a well. So the monk can't bring the layperson to a place and say, dig a well here, but he could bring, so the way they get around this, you bring, say, the monastery attendant to a place, you say, you know, it would be great if we had a well here. So, and then if the lay worker says, okay, I'll go get the shovel, he keeps his job. But if he says, yeah, it would be great to have a well here, and then goes off and does something else, the next day he might get the pink slip. You're fired. Okay, so let's see.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you very much.
I think there might be one or two more questions. So, okay, Alec?
Thank you, Bhante, for leading today. Appreciate it. My question is, in your opinion, do these readings apply to more one-sided disputes like bullying or instigation?
Bullying or
Instigation?
instigation. In what way? Maybe you have to elaborate.
I guess just with these readings and how they talk about how to deal with disputes and what to do and what not to do when faced with bullying or someone who's trying to...
I mean, certainly I would say in the case of bullying, this isn't a dispute as such, but this is a case where the Sangha or the community has to deal with the bully and stop him from bullying in some way. And there are measures within which I can't come to, we don't have time for this, but there are regulations laid down within the monastic code on how to deal with somebody who is bullying.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's not so much a matter of settling a dispute, but more of dealing with a bully.
Right. I ask only because a lot of times disputes begin with retaliation from something like that.
Yeah, but there are different procedures for dealing with bullying.
Got it. Understood. Thank you.
Okay, Mariam?
Thank you, Bhante. I have a question regarding the bypassing the rules, basically, and understanding the rules to the point that you have to follow them or you don't have to follow them, or what's the best practice of following them. And for example, it's like if I'm trying to follow the 8 precepts and not eating what's not allowable, it's kind of controversy, because sometimes cheese is okay, sometimes it's not okay, sometimes chocolate is okay, sometimes it's not okay. So this type of rules that it's created and they keep changing, I wonder how reliable those things are and how seriously one has to grasp to them and follow them.
Yeah, I say take those things lightly. Like this is with cheese. With dark chocolate is considered virtually all the monastic communities that I know consider dark chocolate to be allowable because it's just basically sugar and a kind of fat or oil, the oil from the cocoa nuts or seeds. And cheese, nowadays, many monastic communities consider cheese to be allowable in the evening. Yeah, but I say not to worry too much about that.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to have to end now. So we will end with the sharing of the merits. Okay, and so we're going to be sharing the merits from our meditation, speaking the Dhamma and listening to the Dhamma. We share the merits with the Devas. This is the Akasa Tacha Bhumata, the sky-dwelling and earth-dwelling Devas, and the Nagas, the dragon spirits, and then with all beings, inviting them to protect the sasana, the Buddha's teaching, the desana, the exposition of the teaching, and to protect ourselves and others. Akasa Tacha Bhumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyanta Manumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanam. Akasa Tacha Bhumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanam. Akasa Tacha Bhumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantam Manumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang. Dukkha Pata Jani Dukkha Baya Pata Jani Baya Soka Pata Jani Soka Hantu Sabe Pipanino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And then we're going to do 3 bows to the Buddha, and we have a Buddha image behind me, so we could do it. Here's the chant.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bow to Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Bhante. Have a good lunch.
Thank you, Bhante.
Everyone,
Sadhu Bhante.
Saranai. Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you, Bhante.
Namo Buddhaya, Bhante. Be safe,
Bhante.
Thank you
Bhante.
all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you. Bye,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante.
Bhante. Bye. Have a great day.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bhante.